Welcome everyone to this class about the HTML, which of course stands for HyperText Markup Language. And if at all you want to learn how to develop a website, if you want to learn how to design a website, or if you want to understand more about the website, or even the origin, and of course the way people brings up websites, this is actually the right course for you. So at this particular point, the language we are actually having with the discussion we will have actually through the series of slides is actually about the HTML. We want to understand more in depth about HTML from the basics. And it doesn't mean that you have, if you do not have any knowledge on web development, this is actually the right place for you. So join me as we dive in and understand about this HTML. Now, there's a bit of topics we will cover, starting from, of course, the introduction to HTML. We will move to understanding what are the HTML editors, what are the HTML basics, what are the HTML elements, attributes, and so many other things that comes into play. So without further ado, let's just start our class. Now, when it comes to HTML, if you look at the front face here of my page or the face of your desktop, you're able to see, a PowerPoint presentation, which of course, I have the HTML as actually an abbreviated word, but of course in full it stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And this markup language, it means that it's actually a type of language. You see, when it comes to programming languages, you might also ask yourself, what is this? What are these languages? So you might end up along the way, of course, listening or coming across like a programming language, a scripting language, a markup language. So we have those types of languages, but it's very important for us to understand HTML at this particular point. Now, HTML is actually a standard markup language for creating web pages. And what HTML is all about, apart from, as a markup language, and of course in line to web pages, it is actually the sole or the actual standard language that is normally used by developers to at least come up with a website. So for this particular point, we have also to discuss or to understand about a website or the difference between a website and a web page. So there's a web page, which of course is a single page in a website, and we have a website, which is actually a collection of, a collection of web pages. But of course, remember, these web pages are linked. So we will try to understand about the linking part or the HTML links on that note. So I can say that HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. I can also say that HTML is a standard markup language for creating web pages. I'm still right. You can also say HTML as a language describes the structure of a web page, which is still okay. You can also say that HTML consists of a series of elements, which still defines what HTML is all about. You can also say that an HTML element tells the browser how to display the content. And you can also talk about, if at all, you want to define HTML or what HTML is all about, you can also base it on the HTML elements, which are actually the label pieces of contents. So in a general, HTML is a standard language, or is actually a markup language, a standard markup language for creating web pages. So at this particular point, as part of the introduction, that is, of course, what HTML is all about. You'll be able to understand more about HTML. What are some of the techniques that are used? What are some of the symbols that represents HTML? And of course, how do we write our first code? How do we even generate our first basic HTML structure and all that? But remember the word standard markup language. So even when you open or even try to access any source code for any website, you'll be able to see some HTML elements. So there's no way that you can skip HTML and say that you're coming up with a website or you're creating a website. But for any person who does not have any knowledge on HTML or on web development, this is actually the right place for you. And of course, this is the right place to start. Now, from this particular point, we want to talk about the editors. And when we talk about the editors, we have so many editors out there which can be used to talk about, to come up with a website or even a web page in that matter. And you realize that HTML editors, in other words, it's actually a simple text editor, because a simple text editor is all what you need to understand HTML, to learn HTML, to use HTML, and of course, to interact with HTML. So you just need to have a simple text editor that you can understand. We have from simple or simpler text editors to a more complex text editors. So here I'm referring text, I'm talking about text editors. Now, these text editors will act as a tool. It will act as tools to be used in implementation of developing a website or developing a web page in that manner, because it is actually the web page that you will be concentrating on. You are not actually concentrating on the website. It's of course, after you have this few number of web pages, you can link them together to form a website. So we will, yes, in general terms, we have the website as an image, but of course, what you're concentrating or what you're working on to bring up that particular website into play is actually the web pages. So the web pages is what you'll be creating one at a time. Now, remember that we had in your computer, you have probably a notepad. And for a notepad, that is actually the basic starting point, because you can actually even come up with HTML codes. So you can again have other advanced. Notepad always comes by default when you're using the Windows operating system. And of course, if you want to advance more, you can still have some available downloading text editor tool, which of course are online. For example, we have Sublime Text, we have VS Code, we also have the Notepad++, and we have so many others. So there are actually a range of text editors online, and you don't need to fix yourself probably on more complex ones, and yet we have more simpler ones. So just go with what, of course, can actually, make you proud in developing websites, and of course, more simpler to do that. Now, so one of the examples of the text editor here that I have is actually the Sublime Text. So if you look at my screen, I'm actually having a Sublime Text. And of course, initially, people also had to start with the Notepad. If you remember the Notepad, just a simple text editor, but remember this one is more manual. You still, or you feel like you need actually to have the HTML knowledge or even the skills within your fingertips so that you can actually use, Notepad. But you see, Notepad is what people used to use before the implementation, the introduction of these other applications, for example, the Sublime Text. Now, the recent text editors have actually made work simpler, because you can actually do what we call the auto-completion. It can give you an int, and once you click on that int, it does what you call the auto-completion. So you need actually to work with what, of course, that is fit for you. And now, when it comes to HTML, this one is actually a text editor. And when it comes to the text editor, we have what you call the HTML documents, because with HTML documents, this is actually how you can start. Or let me talk about the type of document that you're using. Remember, it is HTML, but what is the type of document that you're using? What is the type of documentation that you are currently using? So you see, when it comes to the HTML documents, all HTML documents must start with a document type declaration. So I can say must start with a document declaration. Document type declaration. Now, for example, you will end up getting something like this. You will end up getting something like doc, and then type, and then HTML. So this is actually what we call the document type declaration. And of course, this tells you the version of HTML that you're using. If at all your HTML, the Sublime Text, if you're using Sublime Text and then you are trying to project the basic HTML structure, and it gives you the doc type HTML, then automatically just know that tells about the version, or tells you about the version of HTML you're using. So we have a version like HTML5, and that is what is represented here. The HTML document itself must begin. It must begin with HTML, and then of course it must end with HTML. This is how you can tell that this is a what? This is an HTML document. So it must start with HTML and it must end with HTML. So it means that all your codes should come in between. All your codes should come in between. Now, for your work to be visible, for you to have the visible part of the HTML document. So between body, we have this and this. Between body and this is actually where you can have all the visible part, whatever thing that will be displayed on your browser, the visible part of your website, or the visible part of the HTML document must always lies between the body, this HTML element. So these are referred to as HTML elements, these are referred to as HTML elements. But remember, for HTML documents, we've talked about this, which represents the document type declaration. And this actually tells you about the version of HTML you're using. So most of the time, you'll find that we have, for example, HTML5. And of course, this is an improvement from the earlier versions. So these are just but basic things you need to understand, because when you talk about the doc type, because at some point you might end up seeing doc type HTML and probably wonder what it means. And the appearance of this doc type is only once. It will always appear at the top of the page before any HTML tags. Now that brings us to something else. We have what we call HTML tags. And when you talk about HTML tags, what do we mean? What do we mean by HTML tags? So when you talk about the HTML tag, HTML tags are just but symbols, or are just but keywords present on a web page. Let's say these are keywords present in, let's say present on a web page that defines how your web browser must format and display content, or display the contents. So this is actually what HTML uses. They are just but keywords. For example, if you look at this HTML, we have these symbols, and these symbols are always denoted like this. So we have, so the first one is actually a tag. All of these are tags. But you see, when it becomes an element, because when you attach a name in between, it becomes an element. For example, you have body, and then you have body. So this is actually what you call the start start or opening tag. And then this one is what we call the closing or the end tag. So we normally have these tags. And of course, this is exactly what defines. If you want to write or to have a proper HTML, for any information to be viewed on a browser, in terms of the formatting, you can use HTML tags. But you see, once you get a good understanding of how these tags are implemented, of course, when creating or coming up with an HTML element, then the better. So when it comes to the HTML, it comes to the text editors, just to know that we have one as Notepad. We also have one for, as a Sublime Text, and you can decide which one do you want to. Now, this takes us to what we call the HTML basics. So with HTML basics, we want to understand the actual implementation of an HTML. Because with HTML, there are some very important things to note. Number one, assume that you've been given a task by a tourism board to come up with their website or to develop a website for them. The first thing is that you need to prepare or to create a folder for that specific project, because it's actually a project. Because under tourism, you need to develop a website, and you will end up having web pages. You will end up having some images. You will end up having some styles. You see, you might also end up having some advanced, for example, you want to embed or to use JavaScripts, you can still have. Now, if at all these files are not on the same folder, it becomes difficult for you to trace your files. So what is most important is that you need to rename or to create a folder and give it a name like tourism. Now, this does not mean that it's only tourism. You can be given even a job or a task of developing a government website, developing a personal website, and all of this must have its own project folder, what you call the project folder. So you must be organized in such a way that all your files are easily reached, and of course they fall under the same the same folder. Now, the very first thing before you even project the basic HTML structure is for you to have what you call that project folder. So what you do is that you need to go somewhere, open like a file explorer, and then of course from there, choose a site or a point where you can create a folder. For my case, I can create a folder here, can come here, choose that, and then from the this one, we can rename this folder. So I can decide to rename this folder as forest. Assume that I'm working with the forest website, so I can have something like forest. So this forest is actually my main project folder. And then what I will do, I will go back to the Sublime Text, because this is the editor I'm using, or you can go to any editor you're using, any text editor you're using. And then for a good way of operation, just go to File, and instead of opening a file, just open the folder so that you can have a clear view of everything that is happening under that project. So I'll click Open Folder, and specifically I will go to Forests, because this is where my folder is, and then I click Select Folder. Now from here, this is what you'll be you will see. We not save this one, but this one is what you will be able to see. This part. So you can see that you have a pen, a window pane on the left part, and of course we have the forest here. So we need to make sure that all the files falls under forest folder. So from here, I will just right click because I want to create the first web page. I want to work on a web page at a time. But since I want to take you through the introduction part, and of course some of the tools that are used in HTML, I'm going to need, going to create only one single file. So I'll just create new file, and it will give me as an title, and then come to File and Save As. This is the beauty of it. So once you click Save As, automatically it will take you directly to this particular folder. And you need to rename the first folder or the first web page as index.html. Now we need an extension here. So how does the system knows that this is an HTML file? Every file must have an extension. So for any file to be identified as an HTML file, it must have an extension .html. And then save as type, it should be all files. So from there, click save, and automatically it will be renamed. The title will change to index.html. Even under this folder, you'll be able to see we have index.html. So from this perspective, we need now to project the HTML structure. And the HTML structure means this. This one, yeah, specific for exams. So I don't think I can perform the exam. So from this point, we have index.html as a file. And then from here, we have forest. So the first thing is for me to project now the HTML basic structure, the HTML basic structure. And this is how we do. So the first thing you need to note is save your file, save the file first. And after saving, now you can come and use this simple. These are the tag. So I want to create the HTML tag. That is the first thing, the first tag. So I'll do HT, and then it will give me some ints. Then I will click enter, and automatically it's going to project my first basic HTML structure. So this is actually your first HTML structure. So with this one, you'll be able to see that we have the document type declaration up here, which is represented by doc type HTML. We have the HTML as the first tag, and of course, HTML as the last tag here. So anything that comes in between the HTML tag is considered, part and parcel of the execution of the web page execution. Now, from here, you can see that we have the head and we have the head here. Then we have what to call the metadata here. And of course, this metadata clearly symbolizes a lot. But for basic points, let me just get rid of this, or you can just ignore it for now. But immediately after head, we have this title. So this title actually is the title of the web page. So if I assume that my web page is actually the home page, then I will just type here home. So remember, the wordings should actually come in between, home. So we have the title. So we have home. And then from here, we have the body. So the body, we have the opening body tag, and also we have the closing body tag. So if you want to make anything visible in your web page or in a browser, you need to make sure that you have it within the body. You need to make sure that it comes within the body. So you must be able to project the basic HTML structure. But of course, some browsers, if you do automatically, it may not have the metadata, but this is actually the basic. Sometimes doc type HTML is non-mandatory, but of course, this tells you that the type of HTML you're currently using is actually HTML5, because this is actually the document type declaration. So you must be in a position to understand. But of course, without the declaration part, your website can still work. But remember, this is now the basic HTML structure. You must actually know how to bring up this. Because if you miss one, if you look at the title is enclosed within the head, not the head enclosed within the title. So that is very, very important for you to understand that. Now, when it comes to the another point here is about the HTML elements. So we have what we call HTML elements. Now, using the same concept here, when you talk about the HTML elements, these are elements that are defined by a start tag, some content, and an end tag. It is being defined by, remember, I'm talking about the HTML elements. So we are talking about, they are being defined by what? Defined by a start tag. Just talk about some content and an end tag. For example, e.g., you can have something like this. You can have something like, let's say, body. Let me have body as an example. Remember, you can do what you call the auto-completion. So the body alone as a tag is actually a starting tag. And then let's say followed by a text. Let's assume that it is welcome. And then, so welcome is a content, and then followed by the end tag. So when you have a representation of this, it becomes what you call HTML elements. It becomes what you call HTML elements. So when you have some content in between a starting tag or a tag, both starting and end, or you can actually call that an HTML element. You can actually call that an HTML element. So for HTML elements, you'll find that we have different HTML elements. We have even what we call nested. We have what we call nested HTML elements. And for the nested HTML elements, this is of course where you have, you have elements that contains other elements. You have elements that contains other elements. For example, when you have, this is actually, all these are elements. For example, this body is a starting tag. This is a closing tag. Now, if I come here and use what you call, let's say I want to project a paragraph, or let me just use header one. You see, it's also an element. It's also an element. Header one for H1. And of course, if I come down here and say welcome, now you can see that I have body. Body start tag is actually an HTML element. But of course, inside this body, we also have another element. So this is what you can say. H1 is a nested element because it is within, or it is actually enclosed within the body element. So that is actually what we call HTML element. So you must be able to understand. And most of the things here are elements. For example, you're talking about this tag. Even this one is actually an HTML element. This one is an HTML element. You have this is HTML element. So element means, or HTML elements are defined by a start tag, then some content, and then end tag. With the elements talked about, we have what you call attributes. We have what you call HTML attributes. Now, in other words, HTML attributes, this provides, you can say HTML attributes provides additional information about a what? Provides additional information about an HTML element. Provides additional information about an HTML element. For example, you must have an element for you to have these attributes. Now, assume that I have this element called body. This is an element. Now with body, when I come to this point, I can use what you call a class. I can also have another body. And inside here, I can use what's called an hide. I can have an image, and you can see that I have a source. I can also come and have a link and say like that. Now, you see all these in maroon color, they are all elements. Body is an element, body is an element, IMG is an element, A is an element. But what is in purple color, they are all attributes. They are trying to give us additional information about an HTML element. So you must be able to associate or to identify these HTML attributes. This is the beauty of using these advanced text editors, because it can give you in colors. You might note that especially all the HTML attributes at this particular subject, they are all in purple color. Then the HTML elements, they are all in maroon color. So attributes elements, or all HTML elements can have attributes. And of course, attributes provide additional information about an element. And these attributes are always specified in the start tag. These attributes are always specified in a start tag. So about the HTML attributes, you'll be able to interact with them, but that is how the HTML attributes is all about. Now, this takes us to the next point about the headings. Remember this about the HTML headings. And with HTML headings, we have different headings. So with the headings, you'll find that we have like H1 to H6. And of course, with the headings, when you talk about the HTML headings, this is how you can style. It's more like formatting your work. Because when you talk about the headings, this actually represents the titles and the subtitles. Titles and the subtitles. Titles and the subtitles. And of course, most of the time, these titles and the subtitles, you can display them, or titles and subtitles that you feel like displaying them on your web page. So you have different variations of the headings. And of course, this is well represented by this tag. We have H1. And of course, this way H1, headings can run from H1 to H6. So you can have all this. You have H4, you have H5, and then the last one, you have H6. So these are what you call the HTML headings. These are what you call the HTML headings. So at this particular point, we want to see how these headings behave. And of course, I'm going to attach a uniform word, or just a common word here all across. I want them to carry the same name. But this time around, we will be in a better view to understand their sizes. Now, when it comes to the H1, this is actually the larger size. H6 is the smaller size. So if you're using, let's say you're using Sublime, and you feel like you want to execute or see whatever thing that appears on the body part, what you do is that after you write, just go to File and click Save. From there, come and right click. Or you can still visit your folder like Forest, and you're able to see your file here, of course, with an icon of a browser. But you see, the simplest way to do is just right click here and click Open in the browser. So automatically, this one is going to open in a browser. And this is exactly what you have. So you'll find that the H1 is actually larger compared to the H6. The H6 is the smallest one. So in terms of the headings, you can actually choose you can choose which one to use as for the title, which one to use for the subtitles. But this does not also limit you. You see, you can actually go beyond the H1. If you want to make your title more larger than the H1 can provide, and of course, that means you need to implement or to make use of the CSS. That means you need to make use of the font size. You can actually increase the size of the text to whatever level you want. Now, that takes us to the paragraphs. And under paragraphs, you'll find that we have what you call the HTML paragraphs. And the paragraphs are just but a series of, let's say, a group of sentences. But of course, for you to fully define what a paragraph is actually described or defined based on the number of lines. So a paragraph always starts on a new line, and is usually a block of text. A block of text. So assume that I have this sublime. You can see that these numbers on this side, this represents like a line. This is line 9, line 10, line 11, line 12, line 13. So when you have a block of text, then it becomes what you call a paragraph. So a paragraph is always defined by this tag. A paragraph is always defined by P tag. And of course, P tag must have both the opening and the closing, or the start tag and the end tag. So it means that if I want to make a paragraph, then automatically the paragraph is going to carry a block of, have more than one line, of course, and it's going to be a block of text. Block of text makes up a paragraph. So in this section, you'll find that if I want to make a paragraph, at this particular point, I can just get some dummy info. Let me just do that. So if I do, let me assume that I need to get this. So if I have this information here, because this is my paragraph, I should have the information in between. So now you can see that I have a paragraph. This is a paragraph. And this paragraph is always represented by this particular element or these tags. So now when you save this, so I can go to File and Save. And when I come to this point and reload, now you can see that I have a what? I have a paragraph here. So you must have a series of paragraphs. And in other words, you can end up having a series of paragraphs. So if I want to make another paragraph, probably I can still come here and do P. And then in between here, I will right click and paste. Still, you can see that I have another paragraph here. So this paragraph is well represented with the dummy data. So if I save it, so it means now that I have two qualifying paragraphs. So if I come here and reload, you can have two paragraphs. So a paragraph, of course, always starts on a new line and is usually a block of text. It's usually a block of text. So if you get a good understanding of some of this information, when I talk about HTML paragraphs, at least identify, know how to work with paragraphs. Which HTML tags represents that? Now that takes us to the styles. And with HTML styles, we have the HTML styles, and also we have what you call the CSS. Of course, HTML style is more like an introduction to HTML CSS or the stylings. But of course, we have some styles attributes. You must know that a style is an attribute. Remember, we talk about, so if I can just get rid of this. When you talk about body here, if I give it like style, you can see that it is an attribute because it's in purple color. So HTML style attributes. So this is actually what makes the HTML. It actually defines HTML, because remember, HTML is all about the structure, but you see the CSS is like now bringing the fleshy part. or even to make sure that your website is more appealing or even web page is more appealing. So setting the style of an HTML element can be done with the style attribute. So what you need to know about the HTML style is you can have this attribute, and this attribute can always appear on the first tag of all HTML elements, whether it is body, whether it is H1. Even if I have H1 here, and then I come on the first part here, give space, and then do style, you can see it's always there and is represented in all starting HTML tags. So when it comes to the HTML styles, you need to understand that it is actually represented by the word style. And this is actually an attribute. So you will find that in the actual sense, you will find we have, for example, the tag name. What is the tag name? Then we have the word style. And then we have what we call the property. And then we have the value. We have the property and we have the value. Now, this is actually how you are introduced to HTML style. For example, let me have, for example, the H1. And I assume this H1 is all about this. Have this H1. So the tag name here is this. This is the tag name. H1 is the tag name. Now, give a space there and type style. Give a space there and type style. And then, so it means that this style has been represented here. Immediately after the tag name, you give a space and then you type style. So it means that my element is now ready to for styles to be applied. And what are we applying? Remember, welcome is what we are in our target here. It is an H1 header, and H1 is all about the heading. It's actually the largest header. So when I come to the property, assume that I want to apply color to welcome. I will just say color. So the color is what is called property. Now, what is the value? The value is now red. The value is red. So we have the style, we have the tag name, we have the style, we have the property, and then we have the red. Now, if I go to another one, let's say H2. H2, I want to have the style, and then I say color. Let me have like pink. And then here we can say welcome. So now you can see again that we have the tag name, we have the style, we have the color, and then we have, we have the property and then we have the value. So if you decide now to come and save, let me get rid of this and get rid of this. So if I save it and then go back to my Chrome and then reload, now you can see that I have welcome, which is always represented by the red color. And then we have the second for the H2, which is represented by the pink color. So in other words, style, HTML style must be represented by the HTML attribute called style. Assume that you want to apply the background color to the body, the entire body, with using style. You can just say style and then just come and say background color and say something like blue. You have something like blue. So if you save your work, then come here and reload, now you can see that you have the blue color. So this is actually, I am able to apply the blue color with the help of the HTML attribute, which is actually the style. So you can actually use attributes in different ways. So that is about the HTML styles. And of course, that takes us now to what we call the HTML formatting. And with HTML formatting, this HTML actually contains several elements. even to formatting, like even elements for defining text with a special meaning. Assume you have a paragraph and you want to define a text with a special meaning. Now, let's assume that I have this. Let me have like H1. Then let's say, welcome to Africa, the land of, let's say the land of mankind. Now, if I save my work here, then go and reload. Now, this time around, if you're making a change, you don't need to open so many tabs. Just reload, and of course, you'll be able to see some of this information. And in this scenario, let me also get rid of the background color. I don't want to have the background color because I want to make my points straight. So we have this, welcome to Africa, the land of mankind. Now, in expressing the HTML text formatting, remember we've said that HTML contains several elements for defining text with a special meaning. Now, special meaning in such a way that some text can be bolded, some text you can apply subscript, some text you can apply superscript. And let me give you these examples here. So for example, we have B. Okay, so we have B. And this B, let me just have it like welcome, no problem. Let me just say, let me use just a word like welcome to Africa. Let me just say welcome to Africa so that you can see the difference. I think it's fair if I just use this. Okay, let me get rid of this. Now, this B represents what? Okay. This B represents, so this is B, so B for bold. So B for bold. So if you want to make your text bold, for example, welcome to Africa, you want to make it bold, you can use B. Another one is strong. So this is actually B for bold, and you are trying to make welcome to Africa text bold text. Strong means that you want to highlight important text. Let me just say important text. And then let's say, let me just give their definition like bold text. So whatever thing I'm writing in between, that is what it means. B for bold text, strong for important text. We also have, let's say, high. This is for what? For italics. This is for italics. We also have EM. EM for emphasized text. Emphasized text means that this text is emphasized. This text is emphasized. And you can end up having multiple. For example, you can also have what you call the subscript. Let's say the sub. We also have the superscript. If you remember the subscript and the superscript. So I will show you how this works. Let's say subscript. This one is the superscript. We also have ins. It means that inserted text. You can also have so many others. But you see, when it comes to text formatting, we are trying to actually format elements or formatting elements that were designed to display special types of text. Now, assume that I have a paragraph now. Now, let me say first of all, and execute this. Look at that. You'll be able to see that I have different sets. The first one is all about the bold. That was for the B. Important text, this was actually the strong. Italics was for the high. Emphasize was for the EM. Subscript was for the subscript, sub, and then superscript was the sup. And then we have the inserted text for the INS. So if you want to do what you call the file formatting, assume that you want to write this date, 28th. Today's date is actually, let's say 10th. Okay, let me have just a random date, TH, and then let's say September 2023. Assume that you've been tasked to format this. You've been tasked to format this. So what you can do here, you can say, for example, the TH. TH, I want it to be superscript. So you can have like that. Now, for the 28, I want it to be bold. I want it to be bold. You can actually have this as bold. September, you want it to be italic or italicized. You can just enclose it. And then this one, you can actually make it strong. You can actually make it strong. So I have actually do what you call date formatting. Of course, it's a date, but I've tried to format each and every number or letter. So once you save and come and run, look at that. This is exactly what we have. Of course, if I get rid of this, come and reload it again, you'll be able to see that I have 28th September 2020, 2023. So when it comes to the file text formatting, it is very important for you to understand all those elements. There are special elements to make some special text appear in a fashionable manner. Then this actually brings us to the HTML colors. And with HTML colors, there's so much to understand about colors. And of course, a color is just a color, but we have what you call HTML colors. Now, these are represented by this. So when we talk about HTML colors, they are actually specified, or HTML colors are specified with predefined color names. And these predefined color names, I can just mention but 3 of them. We have what you call RGB. We have what you call HEX. We have what you call HSL. Now, what does this mean? When we talk about RGB, this stands for red, it stands for green, it stands for blue. When you come to X, X is actually a different way, but let me just give you a definition of the HSL, or let me just come to the X. X is actually hexadecimal. X is a short, it's actually stands for hexa. Hexadecimal color. And these colors are specified in this manner. It is like replicating the RGB. For example, you will end up having ash, and then let's say we have RR, GG, we have BB, where the double R is red, the double G is green, and the double B is blue. So these are what we call the hexadecimal integers, which specify the components of the color. They are hexadecimal integers that specify the components of the color. So when you're using the X color values, just to know that the color are actually specified using an hexadecimal value in the form of what? In the form of this. So you can also have, for example, ash, you have, let's say 00. Now, this in actual sense is a black color. You go, for example, ash, you have FF. So these are a different color. But remember, initially, we know that colors, we were actually taught to understand that colors are of 7, there are 7 colors, but there are millions and millions of colors. Apart from talking about the red, orange, blue, the 7 set, You can actually still have a series of reddish colors. You have a set of greenish colors, the bluish colors. So there are millions and millions of colors. So when you're talking about the RGB, you can actually specify the 7 colors. But when you're talking about the X, you can have quite a number of colors. You can have millions and millions of colors. So that is what you call the HTML color. And if you Google for this, if you go to something called the color wheel on the on Google, you might end up finding a wheel that has millions and millions of colors. And you can actually make use of those colors by selecting the hexadecimal integers. So that is about the X color. And then finally, we have what we call the HSL color. And HSL color, actually H stands for U. And then we have saturation. And then finally we have lightness. So these are different, like you have U, saturation and lightness. And sometimes you can also end up getting what you call the alpha. It can be HSL, it can be HSLA. So these colors are actually displayed because what does this U? When you talk of U, this actually tells you the degree on the color wheel. Or it gives you the degree of the color wheel from 0 to 360. And if it's going to give you 0 to 360, the degree, the intensity of the color. So you'll find that most of the time, you end up getting like 0. 0 is red. You have around 120 there is green. And then you end up around 240, which is actually blue. So the U is actually the degree on the color wheel from 0 to 360. The saturation is the percentage value. And then the lightness is also a percentage value. But remember, these are it's like finding the intensity of a color, because you're talking about the degree on the color wheel, you're talking about the percentage value on the color wheel, you're talking about also the percentage. So because we have the U, saturation, and lightness, so you can actually compare the 3 colors. But in HTML colors, we have the RGB, we have the X, and then we have the HSL. So most of the time, when we will interact with the CSS, or you interact with CSS, you'll end up getting some of these points. So assume that you have H1. Let's say we have this tag H1, and then I have again, let's have like continent. Now here I can decide to apply a color, and I can say color is red. Yeah. I can decide to come again here and say, let me use one of the colors. Let's say background color. Yeah, let's have like background color. Or let me just use color. And then here, I want to say HSL. Look at the percentage. I'm using HSL. And then I want to also bring another one here, and I can say, okay, color, and let's say RGB. Look at that. So this is actually red. This is actually the normal color. And then of course, this is the HSL color, this is the RGB color. And then let me just get rid of this one. We want to make one more color, So I want to have like color. Then on this color, we want to make use of the, okay. So for the H6, okay. So I can have something like hash, hash, and let's say FF00FF. Yeah. So this is actually the hue saturated lightning, this is the RGB, and this is it. So if I save this, let's say minus this, I want to see, come and reload, you'll be able to have these colors. But you see, for this one, I think it's incomplete. There's something wrong on the last one. Have I gone to, okay, I have not okay, we have this. So I need to enclose which one content, one style. Okay, let me just repeat it. So you can have style, you can have H1. There's a problem somewhere. So we have, okay, yeah. So I can see, So it is somewhere here, we need to have like that. Yes. So now when I come to this, I can reload it and you can see we have these colors. So when we talk of HTML colors, you're talking about like different groups of colors. You're talking about different group of colors where we're talking about the X color, hexadecimal colors, which are always represented by hexadecimal integers. We have the RGB colors, which are just but red, green, and blue. And then, of course, we have the HSL, which is all about the hue, saturation, lightness. And at some point, you can also get the alpha. So these are represented percentages, both, the HSL, and of course, also the RGB. You can do it either in percentage, you can also do it in values. So that is about the HTML colors. And that now takes us to the HTML comments and quotations. So with HTML elements and quotations, we have, when you talk about the comments, for example, I have this, I have this paragraph. I have this paragraph here. And with this paragraph, let me just do up to that point. With this paragraph, like I can have a series of paragraphs here. Yeah, so let me save first of all, let's see. So the paragraphs are displayed, there are two paragraphs there. Now, when talking about the comments, comments means comments are always there, or comments are not displayed in the browser, but they can help document your HTML source code. Comments are always there for good readability. If at all you want to have a good readability of the code or the source code, then you can have these comments. The reason is because you can have someone visit your code or your source code. And of course, that particular person wants to understand more about your code. So what could be the best guiding tool? It's actually the comments, because you'll be commenting each of the paragraph. Assume that the first paragraph here is about, let's say this is about Lorem. The second paragraph is about this is about idea, just example. So you want to tell someone that this paragraph, this one is about Lorem. The second one is about an idea. You see, when you save this, automatically you'll be able to see the same information is appearing here. But comments are not supposed to be displayed. So for you to comment, you need to enclose this statement in this code. So you have to make sure that you start a comment with this, you end with this. You can again come here, start with that, and then you end with this. So this means now that the comments are well catered for. For example, if you go to File and Save and go to the browser, you'll be able to see that they were there. But once I reload, the comments are no longer there. So comments are always there to give someone a good readability of your code. At least I'm able to understand what the below paragraph is all about, and of course, what this line is all about. So commenting or having the standard way of writing codes always includes some comments. Now, when it comes to the quotations, because we are also talking about the quotations. So quotations means if, for example, you want to make use or you want to apply or to make a certain information important, whether you're creating a block quote, you are abbreviating an address, or you're doing a citation, you can always use these quotations. But let me make an example here. Let me make an example here. And this is going to be like a paragraph. So let's say I have a paragraph here. And the paragraph is about, let's say, visit National Museum. Visit National Museum. And then I put a comma there. I mean, a full colon. And then I might end up having like a site. So for this particular point, I might end up having what you call a block quote. A block quote. And through this block quote, I want to make a reference. So I will have what you call a site. And this one I can say HTTP www.nationalmuseum.com. You see? But below that, I can say the museum has been there for the last 100 years. Check for the human ancient human remains. That is the end of my quote. So if you look at this, already I have two things. I have a block quote, which is actually used for quotation. I have also the site. Now, what will happen if I run this? So if I click save and then come here and reload, look at how this looks like. So first of all, we have this visit National Museum. But when I put a block quote, look at how it's starting. You see, it has to start from somewhere here. It is actually starting like you've indented, you've done what you call the indentation. You've actually done what you call indentation. So with the indentation means that you're giving a space. It's like you're doing what you call the left padding. And of course, that means it's going to be a block. So from that, you can actually do what you call, you can actually do the quotations using the block quote tag. You can also use the site just to do what we call the quotations. Now, when it comes to the HTML CSS, of course, it is the CSS, the introduction of the CSS. But of course, remember, this is actually the styling part, because if you're talking about the CSS, first of all, stands for what? It's an abbreviated word. It stands for Cascading Styling Sheet. Cascading Styling Sheet. And CSS saves a lot of work. It can control the layout of multiple web pages all at once. So you can have like even 10 or 20 web pages, but you are actually using one CSS to control all of them. So when it comes to what is CSS, CSS is actually used to format the layout of a web page in terms of applying colors, applying like font sizes, center line, everything. And with CSS, you can control the color, the font, the size of text, the spacing between elements, how elements are positioned and laid out, what background images or background colors are to be used, different displays for different devices and screen sizes, and much more. It's only in CSS that you can have 3 categories, like CSS categories or CSS, let's say ways of CSS ways. So Roman 1, we have what you call inline CSS. Roman 2, we have what you call internal CSS. Roman 3, we have what you call external CSS. So by using inline CSS, you'll be using the style attribute. You'll be using the style attribute. So this is just using the style attribute. For example, when I come to H1, I can decide to have style, like style, and then say color red to this word, let's say ABCD. So this is actually what you call the inline style. When it comes to the internal, you will be using style element. So you will have the style element, just like that. And of course, in the what? In the aid section. It's actually in the aid section. And then the last one, for the external CSS, you will be using a link. And this is this. You'll be using a link to an external CSS file. So in this scenario, you will have the 3 ways of applying CSS. You have the inline CSS, you have the internal CSS, and you have the external CSS. So an inline CSS is actually used to apply a unique style to a single HTML element. Internal CSS is actually used to define a style for a single HTML page. And then, of course, for the external CSS, is also used to define the style for many HTML pages, which is actually the best way. The external CSS is the best way even to hide some of the stylings you're using on your browser, because if you apply them, or if you have, let's say, a complete website and you're assuming that you have both your HTML code and the CSS or the styles, you see people might end up getting your code or the source code. So putting into practice here, assume that I want to give a background color using inline CSS. I will come to the body and say style, and then assume background color, and then say red. So for this one, this is going to act as inline. This is what you call inline CSS, because when you come here and reload, you'll be able to see the red. It is actually the what? The inline CSS. Now, for the internal CSS now, internal CSS means that if I want to apply the same background color here, let's say the color is red. I want to apply the same background color, but this time around, I want to use the internal CSS. I will come below the head and then have style. This time around, you don't need to worry about this, just get rid of that. And then you have this style. Then say body, and then paste it like that. So there's difference between the inline style CSS and the internal CSS. So this is the internal CSS. So when you have this, now let's see whether it's going to change to purple. Is it going to be applied? Let's go, reload, look at that. The purple color has actually come up. So this is actually what you call the internal CSS. Now from here, I want to see whether we can apply or we can use now the external CSS. So it means now that we have our page here. When you go back and reload, nothing appears. But you see, we want to apply what you call the internal, the external CSS. So with the external CSS, and the best approach is that in your project folder forest, you need to right click and create a new folder. Call this folder CSS and press enter. Now, under this CSS, we want to create a file. And this file is a CSS file. We want to call it style.css. So if you look at there, if I expand this CSS folder, you'll be able to see style.css. So it means that for me to get into this file, style.css, I need to get into this folder called CSS. So this is what you call external CSS. So when I come to my main page, I want to apply a background color on the body. But this time around, I want to use the external CSS. So first of all, if you come here and say body and apply this color, this time around, I want to give it like, let's say something like maroon color. You see? If I come here and save, nothing happens. It's still as white as a snow. But look at this point. We say that for the external CSS, we are supposed to use the link. So it means now that you need to come below the title and use what you call link. Press enter. You'll be able to find this link. It will give you like the real style sheet, type is CSS, but the most important part is this part. So I want to make a reference of my CSS file. So click in between there. Now, where is my style.css file located? It is located in a folder called CSS. And then inside there, I will have now the style.css. So this is now a complete. I have my page here and I have an external CSS. So I am making a reference of the external CSS from this file. So if I come and save, come here and reload. Look at that. The color has appeared. So the best option for you to have is actually to train yourself in using the external CSS. And we are saying it is more powerful because with the external CSS, you can actually define styles that can apply to multiple web pages, that can be applied to multiple web pages. Now that brings us to the end of section 1. Remember, this is actually what you call the HTML tables. And HTML tables is going to mark the end of this section, but of course, it's going to also mark towards the start of the second section, which will complete the introduction to HTML. And for this scenario, when you talk about HTML tables, we are talking about the definition. How can we define a table? How can we define a table? So when you want to define a table, you want first of all to understand some concepts here. We have some elements, for example, TH. TH means, stands for table header. We have TB. TB, this actually is for the table body. We have, for example, TD. This is for the table data. You can also have TR. This is for the table row, table row. So you can end up having a table. And of course, with this table, you can define, you can say you want, your table to appear as well. So with the table header, the table body, the table data, the table row, all these are there to define your table. And we have a lot of things to talk about in tables, but you see, these are the basic elements you want to know How do you develop a table? And of course, don't forget about this. It's actually another element. So let's do this. I want to come up with a table. You have this. So this, of course, must tell the system that you're trying to come up with a table. From there, I need to have the table. Let's use the table row first. Let me make it more simple. Table row. And then under table row, you will have table data, you will have a series of table data. Table data, you have a series of table data. So you have table rows, and then we have the table data. So you, inside a row, you have data. Now, if I talk of, let's say one mango there, and then we can have like a student. You see? Let's see what will happen here. What type of table am I trying to project here? So if I do save and then come and reload, look at this. Of course, let me get rid of this style first. So look at this. I have one mango student. Now, this is a row. If I copy this row and place it down here and place it down there and place it down there, it means that I have how many rows? If I come here and reload, look at that. I have this row. So it means that I have 4 rows. I have 4 rows. But to make things simpler, let me use like 2 rows so that you can understand it more simpler. Okay, we have 2 rows. Perfect. So by having 2 rows, we can also decide, or we can also apply what you call the border. And for this border, I want to put the border under row and under table and row. So I will come here to the style. I will mention table, comma, I will mention row, because I want to apply some CSS, some border lines on the actual table and on the actual table row. So here I can just say border, and I can say 1 pixels. It's a solid red. Then I'll come and save. So when you come here and reload, you can see that we have, one solid color. But again, let me add the TD. So when I add the TD and do that, you can now see that I have somewhat. I have the border. So we have the table TR and TD. So table is this, TR is the table row, and then TD is the table data. So in simple terms, you can actually project or come up with a table. Now, there's also this that you can have. For example, you want to make, is it table head? Table head. And of course, this table head, I want it to appear, let's say here, of course, below this. And then let's say these are numbers. Let me just first of all test. Yeah, you can see like we have a number. And then of course, that is number. And then the second one, probably I can have something like, okay, so you can still have the same thing here. If at all you want to give a title, that is the table head. So if I come here again, you can see that we have number. But the basic concepts here is for you to understand how do you, or what elements makes up a table. We have the table element, We have the table header element, we have the table body element, we have the table row element, we also have the table data elements. So as a matter of introduction to HTML, at least you have a glimpse or you have a good view of what makes up elements. So starting from what is HTML, what is of course stands for, into introduction, to text editors, to HTML basics, to HTML elements, to HTML attributes, to HTML headings, to HTML paragraphs, to HTML styles, to HTML text formatting, talk of colors, comments and quotations, HTML, CSS, and finally talk of HTML tables. Now, this actually rounds up our section 1. And with this new beginning, with this new journey of HTML, you'll be able to make a step, because always a step or a journey always starts with a single step. So when you do there's a lot of practices based on, of course, what we've talked about, because you see, practice actually makes some improvements. At some point, you need to make sure that you get in touch with the good tutorials and, of course, learn more. So you just learn one thing at a time. If it's a matter of learning HTML tables, just concentrate on HTML tables. If it's a matter of learning HTML columns, or HTML colors, text formatting, quotations and comments, you need to make sure that you get that specific topic. And of course, that will contribute towards your understanding. So up to there, I think we can summarize and of course see you in the next video.